Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the CEO of the Churchill Club, Karen Tucker.
Good evening. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our distinguished members, sponsors, and special guests. Tonight, we in this room are fortunate to witness an historic conversation between a great industry leader, Michael Dell, founder, chairman, and CEO of Dell, in an unscripted conversation with respected journalist Don Clark, San Francisco Deputy Bureau Chief of the Wall Street Journal. Michael and Don, thank you for choosing to address our members this evening. I want to flag 3 events for you in particular that are coming up soon. Sheryl Sandberg, the Chief Operating Officer of Facebook, this Thursday, October 15. Next, energy efficiency, innovations and opportunities, with a great panel to include Valley icon and legend Andy von Bechtolsheim and Sun Microsystems. He's the co-founder, of course, of Sun Microsystems, and SAP's Chief Sustainability Officer, Peter Graf, and that is on Thursday, October 29. And finally, Jim Goodnight, founder, chairman, and CEO of SAS, the world's largest privately held software company, on Tuesday, November 10. Please do check your program tonight or churchillclub.org for details on these and other upcoming programs. Dell is our lead sponsor tonight, and we appreciate their support. Dell, thank you so much for making this event possible. And our supporting sponsor is Cisco Systems, a longtime strong partner of the club. Cisco, thank you very much for your support as well. And let me also mention Enfatico for their help in putting the program together. And as always, thanks to our members and our terrific Churchill Club staff and volunteers. My last announcement, if you are tweeting tonight, please do use #Churchill Club. Thank you. Now, it's my privilege to introduce our moderator. Don Clark has covered technology for 28 years, about 16 of them with the Wall Street Journal. He works out of the San Francisco office, and as Deputy Bureau Chief there, he helps shape West Coast technology coverage, of course, with a focus on Silicon Valley. And while he now edits and assigns stories to others, he also writes news stories and features of his own. So, of course, he works very hard, but by no means is he all work and no play. He is also a guitarist and a singer and plays in a couple of bands, including one with 3 PR guys from Intel called Spin Control. Don, we're honored to have you with us. Please welcome Don Clark.
I did come, is this thing on? I can tell. I did come up with the name of that band anyway, so that's, so I was told.
Late enough, do we get to hear you sing?
Only if you're bad. No. Thank you all for coming out on what is a very bad night of driving. My deputy at the Wall Street Journal, Pui Tam, came out this morning and came to an event and immediately rear-ended somebody on the way home. So it's like, be careful out there as you drive home. So we're very fortunate to have Michael join us tonight. As you may know, he had a big talk today at Oracle Open World, and I think you also appeared at the Salesforce presentation as well, I think. And so Michael did a good talk today on some of their initiatives. So I want you to welcome Michael Dell.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I wanted to talk to Michael, not start in the garage or I should say the dorm room. The garage is Silicon Valley, sorry. Not go back that far, but go back a little bit of
couldn't afford a garage.
recap a little recent history. Michael, as you may know, left the CEO job and then came back. And so I thought we'd take it from that point and just lay a little bit of the baseline of what the situation at Dell was when you came back. What was going on at that time? What was working and what could be improved?
Sure. Well, you actually have to look a little bit before then, because in the kind of 10 years prior to that, Dell went through a fairly unprecedented period of growth, where we grew from something like 6 billion in revenues to 60 billion. And it was essentially all organic growth. And you don't see it happening very often. In fact, never is probably a better description in our industry or other industries. It's also fair to say that toward the end of that period, the strategies that we had weren't working as well as they were maybe toward the middle or toward the beginning of that. And if I were to even say it more harshly, I could say, okay, maybe these are fully amortized strategies, and we need some new ideas and some new thinking as we think about kind of the next 25 years of the company. And so we did some real thinking about what got us to that 60 billion milestone, and what were the things that were going to be important to us in the future. And we kind of set out on some new paths. We said, okay, services is going to be pretty important to us. Solutions are going to be pretty important. The enterprise, emerging countries are going to be pretty important. And while we've got this direct thing that's really fantastic, and we love our direct relationship with customers, there are more ways to reach more customers, and we have to provide customers more options. And so we started to build a number of paths to go address those opportunities. We also looked at our business and said, some of these things that we constructed as we got to 60 billion, they're not really as relevant anymore. We need to make a few changes. And, so we identified a lot of cost opportunity that we've been addressing. It's not the funnest part of what we do, but an important part of making the business more efficient. We also, of course, like everybody else, found ourselves in the midst of a pretty tough economy here pretty recently. But it really doesn't change the long-term opportunities that we see in our business, whether it's with enterprise customers or smaller customers or consumers. And our business is pretty broad in scope and has plenty of opportunities to grow. And the industry is clearly still evolving. I mean, the interesting thing about our industry is it's always going through transitions. It used to be there was a transition from mainframes to minis to client server. Now you have a transition to virtualization. Anytime there's a transition, it creates opportunities, and those are the ones that we try to lead and win in.
So where do you think you are on this sort of refashioning? How far have you done everything you want to get done, or sort of where would you say you're on in the path?
I think we're somewhere in the middle. We've accomplished a lot. We set out a pretty big cost goal for ourselves. Originally $3 billion. We upped it to $4 billion. It's now looking like the $4 billion is quite achievable, and there's probably more opportunity there. We've been building out this whole solutions and services capability. We recently announced the acquisition of Perot Systems, which certainly gives us more capability there. And the realization here, we built organically about a $14 billion enterprise company within Dell, which is servers, storage, services. When we would go to customers and say, hey, here's the latest, enterprise products, many of them would say, well, that's really fantastic, but that's not what I want. What I'm looking for is I want a reliable, ERP system, or I want, a reliable CRM deployment. And, what do you know about my business to help me actually deploy that? So we've been on a path to build much more solutions capability. And as we've shifted, to services, we said, well, we kind of want to do this differently than the other guys. We'd like to build more remote you know,
Management.
remotely managed services, more IP into the equation instead of just throwing labor at it. And that's kind of what we've done. Some of that we've built internally, some we've done with acquisitions.
We'll come back to your services strategy for sure. So you mentioned the economy. I would be remiss in not asking you where you thought we were in, what point we are in the cycle. Obviously, Intel had some very good numbers today. They may be more of a leading indicator. I don't know, but where do you feel like you are, particularly with regard to the corporate buying, which is so important to you guys?
I think you know, we have a pretty good pulse on this because the products we sell, the services we provide go right to the end customer in most cases, and so you know, there's not a lot of queuing up of product in our system. You know, I think it's getting a bit better incrementally. We saw some of that from the first quarter to the second quarter. You know, but I think there are still challenges out there. You know, the U.S. is doing a bit better than Europe. You know, Europe's probably 6 to 9 months behind the U.S. in this. China, we were talking about earlier, is doing particularly well. I would say generally all of Asia minus Japan, you know, is doing pretty well. But, you know, there are still concerns out there. You know, I think when the small business person, you know, reads the newspaper or turns on the television, they're kind of bombarded with, you know, not great feelings, you know, about the economy.
Yeah.
And they're wondering, hey, what about these taxes? And, you know, are there going to be more taxes related to health care, or what about this potential thing that could occur, or that potential thing? And, you know, the person that has 20 employees is saying, I'm not going to hire one more. When you multiply that by 10 million companies, that's kind of what's happening right now in this country. And, you know, so it's kind of steady, but it's not, you know, it's not just going up.
Are you thinking that, I mean, everybody's sort of waiting for a big refresh cycle. Are you thinking that it's going to happen for sure? It's just sort of a matter of time, you know, kind of on the client and server and companies, or, you know, could people really just sort of push that out kind of forever?
Well, you know, the good news for the technology sector is that we're in the productivity business. And, you know, while, you know, the job environment might not be so fantastic in the broader economy, it's actually a pretty good time to be in the productivity business because that's what people are looking for. And I do think the installed base of technology has aged pretty considerably. Most businesses today, at least on the client level, well, let's start with server because that's kind of where the action is today. You know, the latest generation from Intel, the Halem, is, you know, huge performance gains. That's driving a wave of virtualization and server refresh that is stronger than, you know, I think we and many others had expected. So, you know, there's some good news there. As that architecture rolls through to the desktop and to the notebook, you also have at the very same time Windows 7 showing up, and shortly thereafter Office 2010, which most people haven't really paid attention to yet, but I think that'll start to get some attention fairly soon. You know, the average client device inside these businesses and institutions is running Windows XP, which, you know, newsflash, is an 8-year-old operating system. And a few things have happened in 8 years in technology. And when you combine that with this processor cycle, you know, I think there's a very powerful refresh cycle that is coming. It's not going to come all at once, and certainly it'll be company specific in terms of how it gets deployed. But, you know, we're seeing the planning and the early stages of this from the clients that we serve, which would be about 85% of the organizations in the United States that have more than 500 people. So we believe it's going to happen, and it's going to start, as we get into the early part of next year, and it'll continue on from there. On the client side, the server side, that's actually already started.
Mm-hmm. You skipped ahead to my Windows 7 question, so let's just keep on that topic for a second. Are you using it yourself? Do you really, do you like it? Is it fun?
I've been using Windows 7 for a long time now, and actually I'll say something I said on our call a few weeks ago. If you get the latest processor technology and you get Windows 7, you get Office 2010, you will love your PC again. And we actually have not been able to say that for a long time. And it's just a dramatic improvement in performance and capability, and we're pretty excited about that. One other thing, I want to go back to the server for a second, because all of this activity that's going on in the data center around virtualization, some cases multi-tenancy, but usually virtualization, that's driving a huge need to have virtualized storage. And one of the things we did about 2 years ago is we bought a company called Equalogic. And they really grew up around this idea of how do you manage, if you have 10 virtualized servers, no big deal, 20, 30, no big deal. But if you have like 100 or 1,000 virtualized servers, managing the pools of shared storage and doing thin provisioning and optimizing the performance and the snapshots, really big challenge. So, this company had about 3,300 customers when we acquired it. We've added 10,000 new customers. So it's been a very fast-growing product. We're number one in iSCSI SANs, which is the fastest-growing part of storage. And we think that's a very attractive area.
Let's shift a little bit to talk about another thing in the news lately, which is mergers and acquisitions. There's been a lot.
I heard you guys are interested in that.
I don't know, at the Journal. I don't know.
Sometimes.
Funny thing. And if you look at some of the players that have been doing the most actions, you have Cisco, you have IBM, you have Oracle, you have HP. And it almost seems to me like you're kind of rebuilding sort of an idea of vertical integration, that these companies want to have these kind of complete stacks that are hardware and software and services. And I'm not trying to ask you to tell us who you're going to buy next, but my question is more, what do you think about that trend? Is that something that bandwagon you may jump on, or are you going to try to sort of forge a different path?
We're going to forge a bit of a different path. I mean, one of the things that we know from talking with customers is that the desire of customers to buy everything from one company and have that company own all of the technology, there's actually not a lot of customers who want that. There are some, but many more customers are interested in someone who will integrate for them the best technologies and bring them really a solution. And this is kind of how we grew up as a company and how we'll continue to evolve. That doesn't mean we can't own certain key parts of IP that we think are critical for our future. There's another key point here, and that is that there has been a lot of this conversation about the enterprise stack, and it's really been focused on the very largest customers. And what we find, anyways, when you go talk to these very largest customers, they, of all people, are the least interested in having all the technology from one provider. And furthermore, we've built a number of new things at Dell. One of the new businesses we built is a custom data center solutions business, and we've been fortunate to serve a lot of great companies here in this room, and whether it's Facebook is a pretty interesting example, where as they've grown, they've just consumed tens of thousands of servers from us and the kind of related technology. if you look at Microsoft Azure, if you look at Amazon, if you look at these data centers that are being built to enormous scale, they actually look nothing like this vision of the enterprise stack that you're talking about others building. And if I had to guess what the virtualized multi-tenant world looks like in the future, 5 years from now, I think it's more like what we're seeing, these large web farms do. Yeah. And so it's a much more simplified kind of architecture. So take 10 gigabit Ethernet. Pity the fool that gets in the way of Ethernet. I mean, so you think about what we're doing with Ethernet, putting 10 gigabit on the motherboard of the next generation of PowerEdge, and then putting 10 gigabit in the storage layer, and having instead of fiber over Ethernet, how about just Ethernet over Ethernet? It makes it a lot simpler. So, we think that there are many ways to go solve those problems, and you don't have to try to own everything yourself.
So it sounds like, for example, in software, you might partner more than try to build up a huge software business, something like that. There may be some.
I think you'll see us partner, absolutely. But we have some software assets, and we'll probably have some more.
Let's talk back a little bit on services. Tell about a little bit more of the thinking that went behind the Perot systems and how that kind of contrasts with how you see other competitors who have added services, big businesses like HP and IBM.
Well, one of the things we have tried to do is build, as I said, a different kind of services business. And Perot Systems is of a sufficient size that it gives us a certain scale, but it's also not too big that we can't materially alter the mix of the business. So, for example, one of the big things that's going on right now in this country is physicians are trying to figure out, how do I get electronic medical records? And it turns out to be not such an easy problem, because most doctors organize in groups of 1 to 3, right? and they're they're kind of little small businesses, and turns out software as a service is a great way to bring those electronic medical practices online. This is something that Dell and Perot have been working on together for some time, and certainly when we complete our acquisition, we'll go even faster in that area. So it's a different kind of services capability that we're building. But it's also critical that we're able to bring more solution capability to customers, kind of across the spectrum of developing applications. We've been in the outsourcing business really from a client first, and then server and storage perspective. Perot gives us significantly more capability to take on challenges that customers have been asking us to take on, and we have a obviously very broad footprint of customers that we serve, and so there are lots of opportunities there.
I noticed you talk a lot about 7-Eleven lately. Tell that story a little bit. I think you won it from some other competitor, if I can remember correctly.
I think every time you win some other competitor, isn't that?
Well, there you go.
Isn't that? I guess not always, but anyway, the 7-Eleven example is one where we're deploying our managed services offering. They have 6 million visitors a day to their stores. They sell 13 million Slurpees a month. And so next time you buy a Slurpee, you're going to think of the cloud, because Dell managed services in the cloud manage the mobile devices that exist inside all the 7-Elevens, and we've saved them pretty considerable sums of money. And so as we go to large financial institutions, aerospace firms, consumer products companies, public sector firms, large professional services firms. We're bringing a new kind of managed service to these clients.
So let's talk a little bit about the corporate client. That's generally considered kind of almost like a cookie cutter business. You don't hear people talking about the innovation as much, I think, particularly on the desktop, but even in the notebook, I think, in the corporations. Talk a little bit about your we've been talking a lot of server here, but the corporate client a little bit. What's exciting there? What's besides, you talked about Windows 7 and the Halem coming on, but is there anything from kind of like a form factor, experience, style, design kind of thing that's going to help that business a little bit?
Well, the focus that you see inside a lot of businesses is how do I manage the client environment more effectively? Is it client virtualization? Is it a thin client model? Ultimately what they're looking for is they want the identity to follow the user, not to follow a particular machine. Mm-hmm. And they're looking to get a handle on all these costs. There are lots of ways to go do that. We call it flexible computing. The client virtualization wave is just kind of beginning. We certainly architect the whole solution from the, and when you do client virtualization, essentially you're moving intelligence, into the cloud, whether it's in a customer's private cloud or in a cloud that we operate, and you're taking away the variability which drives all the cost, inside these companies. And as they're thinking about the new refreshes and thinking, okay, we're going to do, Windows 7, we're going to do this a little differently. We want some new manageability tools. We want some new, constraints really around this system to make sure that the cost of managing this doesn't get out of control.
So let's switch to the consumer business a little bit. You guys obviously have a big play there. It's sometimes said, I don't know if you'd agree with it, but that the recovery, the recession has been a little harder for you because you've been so tied to sales to businesses, and the consumer market has come back a little faster, and which has helped some of your competitors like an HP. Give me your take a little bit on the dynamics of consumer versus business in terms of your business.
Well, when you look at Dell's business, a little more than 80% of our business is to businesses, institutions, governments, education, that sort of thing, and a little less than 20% is consumer. And we've been certainly growing the consumer business, creating more ways for customers to buy. So about 2 years ago, if you went to go buy a Dell at retail, you would search a long time, never find one. Now we have 42,000 retail locations where customers can buy Dell. The other ways, of course, are Dell.com, which is incredibly popular. We get 100 million visitors a month to Dell.com. That's a pretty powerful way for us to sell our products. And then, of course, we still have some people who call us on the phone, too. We've certainly stepped up the design elements of those products. And I can tell you right now on the direct business, we're seeing a lot of excitement in the new processors, the new Windows 7. Performance is kind of coming back. There was this time where the prices were just drifting down and people were just buying the lowest end device. I think you're even seeing this a bit with the netbook, where if you take a user who's used to a 15 or 14-inch notebook and you say, hey, here's a 10-inch netbook, they say, oh, this is so fantastic. This is so small, it's so cute, it's so light. I love it. Check this thing out. About 36 hours later, the screen's not big enough. Give me my 15-inch screen back. And so we're seeing a bit of that. But for us, it's really about choice, offering customers lots of different options in terms of the product, allowing them to personalize the product, and buy it any way they want. Mm-hmm.
You've done some things to make your designs more stylish and more appealing. To what extent was Apple's success a factor in your thinking, or is there some things you were trying not to emulate Apple about?
I think they definitely raised the bar on product design and ID, and we're certainly paying much greater attention to those things than we were, a few years ago. I think what you also see in the ecosystem is the combined set of companies that we work with, all working together to deliver a much more robust experience. Mm-hmm. So when you take the latest hardware, the latest software, put it all together, you get a very reliable experience that even Walt Mossberg likes.
Who'd have thunk it? The Adamo, this is one of your sort of signature stylish laptops. How is that doing? It seems like I want one, but it does seem kind of at the high end for a lot of people. I'm kind of wondering how that's really doing.
It's doing well as a high-end product, and we've had some history here with the XPS line. You'll see us continue to emphasize performance and design inside our products, whether they're products for consumers or all the way up to business and our precision workstations. We spend a lot of time really understanding what the user requirements are, whether it's a consumer or somebody designing jet engines and doing
right.
proteomics or whatever they may be doing.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things in the recent conference calls you guys have talked about is not going crazy for PC market share in the sense of doing deals that don't make any money. That market, you're not really chasing market share at all costs. It seems like. Correct me if I've got my assumptions there wrong. But I kind of wondered if really you care about trying to go after the #1 unit global PC market share anymore, trying to take that back from HP, or maybe that's just not as big a priority in the grand scheme of your mission right now.
Well, we focus on profit share, and if you think about kind of the hierarchy of what do you really want to do, first thing you want to do is you want to have a loyal customer that is very satisfied, kind of loves the product. Then you'd like to have, you'd like to be able to make a profit from, those transactions and from that business relationship. I think if you do those two things well, your business grows. Mm-hmm. Last quarter we had about $1.1 billion in cash flow from operations. We sold more servers in the U.S. than any company, any other company. In business client, we continue to lead in unit share. But again, our focus is on let's have the most loyal, most satisfied customers. Let's construct a business where we can earn a profit doing that. Mm-hmm. And the other things will take care of themselves.
Let's talk about netbooks a little more. That's an interesting kind of a dynamic in the past couple years. It seems like Intel and Microsoft want to kind of carve that out and make sure it's a very defined segment with its own, say, 10-inch screen, or it has a very set definition. And there's kind of been this fear that it's going to essentially just cannibalize the rest of the whole market, and we're just going to have cheap PCs and crash the prices and things like that. What's your kind of view of that category in terms of, is it separate? What does it sort of tell us about the way the market is changing?
You know, what we've seen is there's been a fair amount of customers not really being that satisfied with the smaller screen and the lower performance part, unless it's like a secondary machine or it's the very first machine and the expectations are pretty low. But as a replacement for a high performing machine for an experienced user, I mean, this is not what we would recommend. It's not a good experience, and we don't see users very happy with those in that scenario. So where is it taking off? It's taking off in kind of new places where the industry is growing. We created a product for schools called the Latitude 2100, and looks like a netbook or notebook or whatever you want to call it. It's actually a system. It comes on a cart, with a whole bunch of these things. They come in different colors, and you roll the cart in, you take them out and give them to the students, you pop them back in, they charge up. It's got the networking all built in. And, our sales of this Latitude 2100 system have been, many times what we thought, because the schools just love it, because it fits their application really perfectly. But as a general purpose, notebook, not really a great solution because of the screen size and performance.
One of the big topics, of course, in Silicon Valley the past 2 years has been the iPhone and the whole smartphone market, and not so much just from the hardware standpoint, but the phenomenon of the App Store has kind of come along, and it seems to be having a lot of ripple effects on software development conceptually. Dell's not in that space, and I don't think you're going to make any announcements tonight, but I'm just kind of wondering about, what do you think about, is the locus of innovation kind of in some way shifting somewhat from the PC to this other space, and what impacts might that have?
Well, we have a customer in China called Tencent, and I know Tencent doesn't sound like a lot of money, but they have 650 million customers, and they're all the people in China who use cell phones. And the reason I know about this company is because they buy enormous numbers of servers and storage from us, and their users are not using PCs. So we think, oh, that's pretty interesting. So we get kind of intrigued by that. I do think there is definitely a phenomenon going on with this internet in your pocket. There are new platforms that are emerging from many companies, and when we look at those, they're pretty interesting, and some of them resemble things that we're pretty familiar with in terms of open systems and the ability to compete in an open ecosystem. And I think you'll see us begin to show up there, gradually. We made a demonstration in China recently. The largest cell phone carrier in the world is in China. It's China Mobile. China Mobile is selling a lot of small notebooks and netbooks today connected to their network, connected to their TD network. Over half of those are Dell. So we have a strong relationship with China Mobile. They asked us to develop a smartphone based on their OMS technology, which for those of you who are kind of geeky is sort of a derivative of Android. And we've done that, we've demonstrated that, and that's kind of where we've started. But I think these ecosystems are developing. We look at the opportunity sort of all inclusive. We say, okay, there's the servers, there's the storage. Really want to be providing that infrastructure to our customers, and then there's the devices as well.
So just want to warn you guys, in about 7 minutes or so, there's going to be an opportunity for you guys to ask questions, so I'm sure you'll have some good ones. So just kind of on a high level, what else is kind of like keeping you up at night, exciting you right now? What are some other topics that we haven't touched on that are just kind of important to you right now?
Well, back on this whole enterprise stack topic, I think one of the interesting things that we see in our business is that we actually have a profound access to customers of all sizes. And, we're quite excited also in serving, the smaller customers and the mid-sized customers. And actually, if you do a little segmentation of the industry and kind of look at all the opportunities, you'll find that they buy enormous numbers of products as well. Because of our direct relationship with tens of millions of business customers, it gives us kind of unique access to those customers. Mm-hmm. So I think it's something you'll see us emphasize and spend more and more time on as we evolve and grow our business. I also think if you look at what's happened in the big enterprises, they tend to use the same volume technologies that get developed first for more mid-sized businesses. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's absolutely played out in the server world, and we think it's going to play out in storage as well.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned virtualization several times tonight. I was at a gathering of Dell customers that were pro virtualization. They were basically running virtualization on Dell, and my first question to them was, well, are you actually buying fewer servers because of virtualization? And they all said, yes, we are actually buying less hardware because of virtualization.
Right.
So that's kind of the other side of that story. So how does that impact you guys?
Beyond the fact that they're buying fewer servers?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the kind of first thing you have to remember here is anytime there's a new technology that, comes along that's really good for customers, you get in the way of it at your own peril. And so that's just not how we think about things. Mm-hmm. Now, you do have to think, well, gee, how are we going to win in virtualization? Mm-hmm. And actually, it's pretty straightforward. You say, well, first of all, let's make the most virtualization optimized servers. So, we have servers coming out with 1 terabyte DRAM footprints. So, you can virtualize an enormous number of servers in one server. You can put your whole database in memory. Mm-hmm. And you want an incredible throughput. You need to virtualize the storage, hence the EqualLogic mm-hmm. Acquisition. We've grown that and taken it to much greater scale, mm-hmm. In terms of capacity and throughput and performance, and taking it to bigger businesses and smaller businesses. And then you have to think about, okay, virtualization goes from server to storage to client to applications. How do you build really a virtualization-ready infrastructure for customers? So that's kind of how we think about it.
Mm-hmm. One of your competitors in the computer space, Sun Microsystems, is about to become part of Oracle, assuming the Europeans don't somehow delay this forever. But what do you think of the role they played in the sense of, they didn't seem to have a big revenue impact finally, but they seem to be sort of a thought leader and at least got a lot of ideas out there. I'm kind of wondering what you think of the end of their existence, since they're a Silicon Valley icon, and whether you have any ambitions to sort of become a little bit more of a thought leader in the sense of driving technology concepts and ideas.
Well, I think there are lots of ways to kind of dissect the industry and analyze it at a philosophical mm-hmm. level. I think when I reflect back on the first 25 years of Dell, I think one of the things that we did, which was fairly unique, was we kind of toppled a lot of proprietary businesses. Mm-hmm. And it might be interesting to imagine, well, gee, what would the server industry look like today if Dell had not shown up and did what it did? Now, maybe you could say, well, somebody else would have done it. Possible. But actually, you know, we did it, so we can take credit for it. And you know, we made those products way more affordable. We also did the same, you know, for clients. We've had some help with others recently have come and joined the party. But, you know, that has made computing far more affordable. It's accelerated the pace of innovation. And then you step back and say, well, hey, what's going on in the world? Let's look at all of the big problems that exist, whether it's in energy or in medicine or any other field. They're all basically computational problems. And, you know, we're part of a cadre of companies that are dramatically improving, you know, the rate at which those problems can be solved by bringing, you know, that technology, you know, very rapidly in a much more affordable way to billions of new, you know, people all over the world. So, you know, I think that's pretty fun. That's pretty cool. You know, when we look at, you know, the outcomes for people in the world that have been touched by technology, you know, we can take some pride that we, you know, played a role in accelerating that and making it happen.
Great. So last thing from me, I think, and we're about ready to go to the audience, just anything really putting on your just really abstract futurist hat, anything you think we should be looking out for just in terms of changes that, you know, maybe we're not thinking about in terms of the way technology is changing or anything?
You know, there's been a lot of discussion about, you know, unified networking, and you've got, you know, switching and fabrics and servers, and, you know, what's going on with all that. You know, we really see you know, a lot of what goes on in the data center, you know, being gobbled up by servers. I mean, we see switching, for example, you know, rapidly collapsing into the servers.
Becoming an application on a regular server?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, you've got, you know, virtualized switches, right? But even the switches that aren't virtualized, you know, they're now sitting inside blade chassis. And so while not that long ago, you know, it sort of looked like the intelligence was getting sucked out of the server and it was going somehow into the network, it actually looks now like it's going the other way, and the server is becoming the epicenter of you know, the data center, and you're seeing the switches getting embedded you know, inside the server. So I'm sure there are plenty of other opinions out there, and that's what makes a great competitive you know, industry, and lots of innovation and new companies, and that's all fantastic.
Great. So do I have some microphone people? So I think I will. Let's go to this one in the middle, right where you are, gentlemen, sir, right there.
I love my jazz. Thank you very much for this 25 years of work. And one wonders what the next 25 years would bring about. And there is one topic that you did mention, performance and proteomics. So I'd like to ask you, do you think that for genome computing, which is coming, it's right here, there may be a suitable platform, especially when combined with FPGA on-socket solutions?
So if I can repeat this, you mean combining genetics and sort of that biological things with electronics to make faster computers? Is that what you're saying?
Not combining, but there's a new data avalanche. Genome sequences are coming in an affordable manner from several sources, and they have to be processed, interpreted in a very time-efficient manner, so that you can have your biopsy data back, processed and analyzed while you are still on the operating table. This is a very fast computing, just like in defense and financial computing industry. So there is a need for personal genome computers, which may exist for defense and financial world. But for the genomic market, which is emerging, The Dell systems appear to be very suitable, especially if they would combine the FPGA on socket parallel processing.
Wow.
Yeah, if you go to Dell.com, you know, a couple weeks ago, I was out at Livermore Labs, and you know, they've got this 9,000 core Hyperion cluster that they've built with Dell servers, and it's a petascale class computing, so it's more than 1 quadrillion floating point operations per second. So you could probably do all that real fast, you know, with one of those. And certainly, you know, you know, you're kind of on a logarithmic scale of improvement in terms of how fast that kind of computing power is going from, okay, now it's just Livermore Labs has it, and then all of a sudden you've got, you know, 20 universities have it, and then you've got, you know, 1,000 have it, and then all of a sudden, you know, it's like right there under your desk. I mean, we're seeing an interesting trend among startups in the biosciences field. And it really relates to them building their own clusters. You know, they show up as anomalies in our system because you have a company that has like 9 employees, but they have 100 servers. And we're like wondering, what's going on here? This is, you know, how does this doesn't really fit into the model here. But then we say, okay, this is a new kind of business where guys are examining, you know, large amounts of data, and, you know, in many fields, you know, the biological sciences are one great example. What I'll also tell you is that, you know, we as an industry have never been very good at predicting what problems people will solve or how they will solve them with the tools that we create. And it's usually some kind of combinatorial effect where people are bringing together multiple inventions and then creating some new thing that you know, one of you are going to create or some other business is going to create. And that's the great thing about our industry.
Great. I think I have another question there.
Mr. Dell, thank you very much for a very interesting evening, and Mr. Clark, thanks for leading a very comprehensive discussion. You know, I have been a fan of Dell, and I've appreciated your passion and commitment to reliability and quality. And as a physician, I'm therefore very excited about your decision to enter the healthcare field. Please, may I ask, besides getting involved in electronic medical records, do you have a vision of getting involved in something more germane?
You know, we have been involved in the healthcare and life sciences field for quite a long time, and, you know, providing, you know, the gentleman asked about genome sequencers. You know, genome sequencers produce enormous amounts of data, and of course you have to store that data, you have to analyze that data, you have to process that data. You know, we certainly build tools that go and do that, and we work closely with the specialized software companies that, you know, are creating, you know, better tools to go and make that happen. You know, whenever we go into an area like healthcare and life sciences, it's going to be very specialized and very vertical. So we have a whole team. That's all they do is focus on that, and certainly you know, there's a lot more to it than electronic medical records. That's one example. You know, Perot Systems as a separate entity today and soon to be part of Dell actually manages thousands of hospitals, kind of completely from, you know, the beginning of the process all the way through, and, you know, that's certainly another level of involvement. We've been involved also a lot in the research and the science end because of our involvement in research-based universities and, you know, kind of supporting the infrastructure that they need to go do the research that occurs there. So there are many, many touch points, and it's a field that we expect to get much more deeply involved in.
Next question.
Hi, Michael. Thank you again for a wonderful evening. I thought I would ask you a few questions selfishly to get some tips from an entrepreneurial perspective. I thought from your journey in that dorm room with $1,000 to running Dell and leading it, and then you left and you came back, and again as a founder and CEO, that's a very interesting parallel with other similar companies, whether it's Microsoft or Amazon. And then you have Yahoo, where the founding CEO sort of came back again, and it wasn't a very successful effort. So what are some of your observations of the journey from an entrepreneur to a leader, and what are some of the challenges that you face in that?
Well, just to clarify, I didn't really leave and come back. I mean, I kind of stayed there the whole time. But I wasn't CEO for about 2.5 years. So just wanted to clarify that portion. I mean, I think, in my case, certainly I've seen the company evolve from its start. There've been probably 7 or 8 or 9 distinct periods of change and evolution, as the business has significantly evolved. I've always tried to not try to do everything myself, and find the very best people I can, and to think about, hey, what does this business need to succeed right now? And there are different things now than it needed 5 years ago and 10 years ago. I also, even though we're a large business and we have a lot of resources and a lot of capability, I still think about us as a new company, thinking about things in different ways, and going after new opportunities, and not really constrained by the past, even though we have some things that we have to think about. I still like to think of us as a startup. Yeah, we have more resources and more capability, but
specific thing that you would attribute, just one thing in terms of growth from the $1,000 dorm room to where Dell is? Was it identifying the right people that you surrounded yourself with, the product itself, culture?
Well, if you had to say one thing, it clearly was the business model that we created, which was very powerful, gave us great insights into the user, had us kind of structurally advantaged, but also structurally listening to the customer in a way that others weren't, and created an intimacy with the customer that has really allowed us to flourish. And all of that feedback and the insight that we get as we work with customers of many different types, as we've segmented many different types of users, that's been certainly very, very key to our success.
Is there another question?
Hi, Michael. You talked about Perot Systems. You hired away the head of M&A from IBM. So my question is, how different does the Dell Corporation look like 5 years from now? What's it going to look like?
I think you're seeing a number of changes, and I think you'll see more shifts in the business as we continue to build more IP into the business, as we continue to go along this solutions path that we're clearly on and having some reasonable success with. So yeah, I think you'll see a number of changes. I mean, inorganic growth has not been a big part of our history. We've done 10 or so transactions. The gentleman you mentioned, Dave Johnson, did 120 transactions, over $21 billion in 8 years. And there may be 1 or 2 people who know more than he does, but I'm not sure. I mean, he really has incredible knowledge, but it's not really about what he did before. It's about how do you apply that to the unique situation at Dell and the unique opportunities at Dell and the cash flow that we have. I mean, we have a very strong cash flow inherent to our business model, and that gives us a lot of flexibility to go add things. But we'll also invest organically. Partnerships will play a big role for us. So, as we set out to think about the next 25 years, we're very excited at the landscape we see, the opportunities that are out there, and we're ready to go.
Next question.
Hi, Rick Merritt from EE Times. I just wanted to ask you to expand on your earlier comments about smartphones and open systems. As the client increasingly becomes mobile systems of many different kinds, we're seeing some real interesting competition emerge between Intel and Microsoft and ARM and Linux. And I'm wondering how you think that's going to play out in the computer industry generally.
I think you'll see, many different form factors, and there isn't going to be one answer there. If you look at computing, there was this idea 10 or 15 years ago of convergence. So we're all going to converge. Actually, the only thing that's maybe converged a bit is data. Devices haven't converged at all. In fact, you have more variety and diversity of devices, and I think that's going to continue. You'll have all sorts of different shapes and sizes for many different kinds of applications, and it'll be based on, hey, what can you do with the device? You're using a device where you've got a screen that is relatively large, and presumably that's because you like to see information. You're editing, you're creating information. A handheld device might not be perfect for what you're doing right now, but you might also have a handheld device, and hey, you might even have another device with a much larger screen, and you might have one in your car too. So, I think you're going to have a lot of different models out there in terms of what the device looks like.
Go ahead.
As Dell architects these enterprise and data centers, what role or percentage do you see the SSDs to play? In other words, energy per computation or energy per data acquisition or whatever?
Solid state drives?
Solid state disks?
Yeah.
Yeah. The performance improvements are massive. Costs are a bit higher. When you think about an array of disks, just making the whole array solid state is actually not the answer, because you spend a lot of money for limited benefit. What you can do, and what we've been working on a lot in the Ecologic development team, is to very smartly understand which files and blocks are being used all the time and very frequently, put those in solid state, put the other ones in rotating media. The other way to think about this is that it used to be that you had to have a lot of disks and heads moving to feed the information into the servers, but with much faster fabrics and solid state disks, you have an enormous amount of data coming in. You don't actually need that anymore. So you can create new models. I talked about the systems with 1 terabyte of DRAM. We even have some specialized customers that are doing this today. They're taking our blade servers, are loading them up with system memory, and they're using these as data warehouses for unbelievably fast business intelligence kind of computing. And so we see solid state playing a role in many different kinds of systems. I mean, it's in the low end because it's light. It's at the high end because it's fast. It's got the durability. We even see it in some of the web farms because they don't have a lot of data, but they need a lot of speed. And so we're also seeing a shift. The disk drive companies have kind of figured out, hey, you know what? We're really not disk drive companies. We're companies that move information through interfaces into computing devices, and so we can use those solid state flash memories with our intelligent I/O systems as well, and so there's lots of opportunity to optimize performance, and solid state disks are a great technology.
We have a question over there too.
Angela Haytek, Visor. One of the things that's always impressed me about Dell has been their logistics and bringing things in, really quickly and efficiently. And what we're moving to now is greening of everything. And so I wondered how, with your logistics, either on the supply chain or on the distribution or on the recycling. I was looking at Microsoft's website today and noticed that they can recycle stuff for you. What are you doing to sort of green your business?
Sure. We've done quite a lot there. We actually became carbon neutral last year, well ahead of others in our industry. Wasn't that hard because the efficiency of our supply chain tells us that we're actually not producing a lot of carbon dioxide emissions. We also, in our supplier scorecards, measure our suppliers on their carbon efficiency. And so, we've kind of used our power with the supply base to really change the equation. We're the first company to offer free recycling for consumers worldwide. I think another big impact has been over the last 4 or 5 years, we've said, let's make the products use a lot less energy. And to give you an example, a client system from 4 years ago would use about $100 of energy per year. A new Latitude E4200 notebook uses about $7 of energy per year. So we've really taken the power consumption way, way down. We've saved our customers billions of dollars of electricity, and I think we've spurred a lot of competition in the industry in a good way to drive the energy consumption of all products down, where all of our PowerEdge servers are Energy Star certified. We're the only firm to have done that. So when you look kind of across the gamut, there's green the environment, but there's the green money, and we've done this really for both reasons, and it's saved our customers money, it saved us money, and it's also the right thing to do. And if you go to Dell.com, you can read a lot more about it.
So was there another? Go ahead.
Hi, thanks. Rob Fitzpatrick. What do you see as your company's role in driving innovation? And I'm thinking in particular from a consumer perspective rather than business, which you've talked a lot about tonight. In the consumer arena, wireless and wireless mobility is continuing to drive on. We've seen the emergence of ATA 2.11n as a standard. Dell participates in the standards groups. What do you see as your role as being a lead innovator versus perhaps a fast follower as trends emerge?
Yeah, those of you who are involved in standards committees will know that Dell plays a pretty active role in the standards committees, and increasingly so over the last, I'll say, 4 or 5 years. And I'll say that we've been more interested in the ones that are enterprise focused and server and storage focused, and so won't really make any apologies there, but that's kind of been a big area of focus for us. I do think when it comes to things like hey, what's the wireless technology standard, or what's the standard for next generation optical disks, we come at this with a bit of a unique perspective, and that's we view ourselves as the customer advocate. And we always try to represent our customers and think not about an ingredient, not about a particular fab or a particular set of patents, but hey, what's really best for customers? And that puts us in conflict many times with historical partners, but we stand up for what we think is right. And some of this stuff happens under the covers. I mean, there were attempts to create multiple different wireless networking standards, even by some of the most prestigious companies in the industry. We strongly objected and say, hey.
But you won't name any names.
I won't name any names, but they know who they are. We stood up and said, look, if you're going to have a wireless networking standard, it should really be one. And it should be the same one you use at home and at the office and the coffee house and the university. And those arguments go on many times under the covers for a fairly long time. But we play a certain role there that I think is pretty powerful.
Go ahead back there.
My question is actually about some of your direct-to-consumer initiatives. I know a couple of years ago you were trying to sell through Walmart, and also Dell has been trying to sell to consumers directly in the emerging markets. So, what has succeeded about those initiatives? What hasn't? What do you plan to do differently from what's working here? I'd be curious if you could shed some light on that.
We essentially, there's three ways to buy from Dell as a consumer. We're talking about the 18, 19% of our business as consumer. We have the walk, the click, and the talk, right? Walk is the 42,000 stores, so those are pretty much all major cities all over the world. The click is Dell.com. We have more than 1 million people a day searching for Dell at Google alone. And then of course we have the talk, the telephone, which was kind of the original. 25 years ago, people call us up on the phone. What we see on the walk-in model is you have a lot of new consumers coming into the world today, particularly in these emerging countries and the third-tier, fourth-tier cities. You get some money, you come in from the village, and you want to get a telephone. How about a laptop? They're going to retail, and that's the introduction, to electronics for them. But they quickly get on the internet, and we think Dell.com is if you look at people that sell stuff online, there are about 4 big ones, and of the 4 really big ones, we're one of them. And we're the only one that has a significant portion of that revenue as commercial revenue. You asked about consumer, but I'm actually going back to commercial because it's where we make most of our profit, and it's the majority of our revenues. And so, I visited a customer today, a large financial concern in San Francisco, and we have with them what we call B2B integration. What that means is that their big ERP system links up with Dell, and they can order stuff kind of auto-magically online, and it just shows up, and everything kind of works really well. So, and the invoicing and the ordering all kind of is all linked together. That's some of what we imagine as we think about how do we use kind of next generation online technologies to create a persistent connection with our customers and really create the next generation of our business model.
I've been told I've just got one more question, so there it is back there.
Michael, thank you very much for coming. Not many of us get an opportunity to sit down at a table and play with billion-dollar chips. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if you can just think over your career and tell us what you think was the one single biggest executive mistake you made.
Mm-hmm. Never made one, I'm sure.
Only one?
Mm-hmm. You've only got time for one.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Biggest mistake. Well, you know, I think there were, you know, some things that we could have done earlier, you know, that I wish we'd done. You know, they really relate to, you know, how do you diversify the company and how do you build new skills? What I'll tell you is that we found ourselves in a pretty interesting predicament, and it goes something like this. You have a strategy, and you're executing the strategy, and it's pretty much working, right? You're kind of growing from the 6 billion to the 60 billion, and you know, the strategy is don't do anything else, just do the strategy, right? And you know, well, you know, I'm not sure how long this is going to keep working, but as long as it's working, we're going to keep doing it. You know, we probably should have, you know, or could have intervened a little earlier and said, you know, hey, we need to, you know, hit the reset button here and start trying and starting some new things in addition to what we're doing to kind of anticipate, you know, this challenge that is coming up. It's kind of hard to do. You know, I don't really, you know, go around living a big life of regret, and you know, I'm not a great historian, so you know, I tend to look forward, look to the future, and you know, every day is a new day. Wake up in the morning and say, hey, look, you know, the world is our oyster. You know, we do have a number of chips we start with here. We've got a lot of great capabilities. We have fantastic people. There are huge opportunities out there in the world. Let's go get them. So thank you.
I think it's a great way to end. You've been a great audience. Thank you.
Okay.
Good. Thank you.
Before you leave, I think we have, as a small token of our appreciation, I believe we have a much sought-after Churchill Club T-shirt for both of you. So really want to thank... I'd also really like to thank Dell again and Cisco for sponsoring, and to all of you for making this program possible. Drive safely and have a good night.